Hi guys, it's Ankita. Welcome to Enchanted Bookends. In this video, I'm going to talk about part 3 of Crime and Punishment. This video will contain spoilers, so if you haven't read part 3 yet, you might want to exit this video if you don't want any spoilers, and you might want to check out some of my other videos. So yeah, without further ado, let's jump into the video. Alright, so the first thing I want to talk about is the start of part 3 for me was Raskolnikov's friend. Also, I think I should start calling Raskolnikov Rodya. I'm going to confuse Razumikhin and Raskolnikov while I talk about them. So let's just call Raskolnikov Rodya and Razumikhin is a friend, right? And he was a star for me in this part. I think Razumikhin is a great side character because if we were to only follow Raskolnikov's raw and like harsh criminal enterprise, our experience of reading this book would be really different. It would be so dark. I mean, it's still dark, but it would have been darker. And I think Razumikhin brings a certain sort of lightness to the story. He is the light to Raskolnikov's darkness, or Rodya's darkness. Rodya's soul is as dark as coal. It's like following him around is as suffocating as being in the depths of Mariana Trench. I did appreciate this character, Razumikhin, a lot in this part. We see him when he has had a little too much to drink and he escorts Rodya's mother and sister back to their tiny apartment. We see him share all sorts of nonsense with them. There are some really amazing things he blurts out and then not so good things, like he totally badmouths the fiance, what's his name? Pyotr, right? Pyotr. Oh my goodness, yeah. And then he regrets everything the next day. But there are a few things that I did make note of. I thought I would share them with you. So first and foremost, on page 241 of this edition, it's the Penguin edition, translation by David McDuff. On page 241, Raskolnikov says that I'm his friend, it's Rodya's friend. So that means I'm your friend too. This statement it oozes out warmth, doesn't it? This idea that, yeah, if you're friend with someone, then their friends are also your friends is lost in our generation. Or rather, it's not very prevalent. I'm sure it's still true for a few people, but it's just not as prevalent as it used to be. But yeah, this also shows the side of Razumikhin that is really warm. He's like a really nice person. All right, on page 241, he talks about nonsense, and he says that talking nonsense is the sole privilege mankind possesses over the other organisms. I couldn't agree more. It's by talking nonsense that one gets to the truth. I talk nonsense, therefore I'm human. Not one single truth has ever been arrived at without people first having talked a dozen reams of nonsense, even 10 dozen reams of it, and that's an honorable thing in its own way. And he goes on to say, to talk nonsense in one's own way is almost better than to talk a truth that's someone else's. In the first instance, you behave like a human being, while in the second, you are merely being a parrot. Anyway, he says a lot of things, and poor women, they are a bit alarmed, but they also realize that, you know, he has been helping Rodya, so they put up with his, you know, drunken ramblings and are kind of grateful for his presence. But the next day, Razumikhin is totally embarrassed. We also realize that he finds Rodya's sister attractive, and she is described as being very beautiful, and so is Rodya actually. So they are both handsome pair of brother and sister. Yeah, when he wakes up, he's totally embarrassed of the things that he said the previous night to both of them, and he still like really grooms himself very well. And later we see that Raskolnikov, Rodya, makes a lot of fun of him. But that was a very cutting timing. We'll get to it later, but I want to talk about Razumikhin first. And then on page 256, at the bottom of the page 256, Razumikhin gives a very succinct observation of how Rodya has been over the last few years, ever since he first got to know him. And he says, I've known Rodion for 1.5 years. He's a morose sort of chap, gloomy, standoffish, and proud. No kidding. Recently, and for all I know, not so recently as well, he's been over anxious with a tendency to hypochondria. But sometimes it's not hypochondria at all that he's suffering from. He's simply cold and unfeeling to the point of inhumanity. It's really just as though there were two opposing characters alternating within him. Yeah, isn't that true? One moment he is cheerful, and the other moment he's like totally irritable. He's sometimes unconscionably short on conversation. It's all, I have no time, stop bothering me. Yet he just lies there not doing anything. He doesn't mock, yet it's not because he doesn't have enough wit, but rather as though he didn't have enough time for such trivial matters. He doesn't listen to what people say to him. He's never interested in what everyone else is interested in at any given moment. He has a fearfully high opinion of himself, yes, and perhaps not entirely without justification. That was a nice way to end it, Razumikin, right? Razumikin, even though he notices these shortcomings in Raskolnikov, he still likes his friend. Which is, all of that credit goes to Razumikin, and none of it goes to Raskolnikov. Rodya, no, none of it. And this character report that he provides of Rodya to Rodya's mom and sister alarms his mother a lot. But his mother also chimes in as she says, what a fantastical imagination Rodya has. And how shall I put it? How capricious he is. I was never able to trust his character, not even when he was only 15 years old. I'm certain that even now he may go and do something to himself that no one else would ever think of doing. Yeah. He has already done something that no one would have ever thought he would do or would ever think of doing. Razumikin also confesses that Rodya had like a pure calculated plan of insulting the fiancé Pyotr Petrovich. And so arrives the letter of Pyotr Petrovich to address to the mother, right? And he says, yeah, I cannot make it today, but I'll be there tomorrow. But make sure that your son who insulted me is not there. And he not only just says that he was insulted by Rodya, he also kind of tattles on Rodya. He's like, oh yeah, also he has been mixing with, a woman of, what does he say? He describes an unmarried woman of immoral conduct. So he's referring to Sonia. And he also gave all of your money to towards Marmeladov's funeral. Yeah, he totally tattles. And then in chapter 3, we see that Raskolnikov's feeling better, and Zozimov's there, and Raskolnikov confesses that on page 270 he says, of course I realized I had no right to part with it. He's talking about the money that he gave to Marmeladov's widow for the funeral expenses, and he says that of course I realized that I had no right to part with it, especially since I know how you had got hold of it. In order to help anyone, one must first have a right to do so, for if one hasn't, and then he says in French, die dogs if you are not happy. He burst out laughing. Isn't that so, Dunya? And Dunya, the sister, is like, no, it isn't. Yeah, he is very rude to his sister as well. For me, my favorite chapter in this book was chapter 5, where Rodya goes to meet Porfiry, and he goes to meet him because he wants his things back, because they are valuable to, not to him, but his mother and sister. So he goes to meet Porfiry and ask him for the items back that he had pawned. The entire conversation dripped with mockery, sarcasm, and there was this back and forth, a very witty exchange, but also it kind of exposes Raskolnikov's mentality to us, right? We also get to know that Raskolnikov already not very long ago wrote an article in which he states that there are two types of people, right? Categorizes people into ordinary and extraordinary. Ordinary like sheep, right? Basically just existing, and the extraordinary are the ones who don't conform to the rules, and those are the Napoleons. And yeah, Raskolnikov definitely considers himself an extraordinary, and there are so many times Porfiry tries to get this confirmation from him. So on page 311, Porfiry says, "For I think you'd agree that if there were to be a mix-up and a person from one of the categories, that's the ordinary and extraordinary, thought he belonged to the other and started to clear away all the obstacles, as you so neatly called them, I mean." And Raskolnikov, Rodiya is like, "Oh, that happens all the time. That remark was even wittier than your last one." Yeah, and Porfiry is like, "Thank you, sir." Raskolnikov goes on, "Not at all, sir, but please bear in mind that mistakes are only possible on the part of the first category, that is, of the ordinary people." And we know that Rodiya thinks he can never make any mistakes. He has a really high opinion of himself. And then on page 312, Porfiry says, "Please tell me, are there many of these people who have the right to murder others, of these extraordinary folk? I mean, I'm prepared to treat them with the respect they merit, of course." The sarcasm. And Razumkin is really surprised at Raskolnikov's, at his friend's Rodiya's mentality, his thought process, his beliefs, his belief in especially this theory of, the ordinary and extraordinaries, at some point get rid of the obstacles, which could also mean that he condones murder, and he says that. But on page 313, "But what is really original about all this, and this really is your own exclusive property, much to my horror, is that you condone the shedding of blood on grounds of conscience. And if you will forgive me, with such fanaticism, that's what your article is really all about. I mean, to condone the shedding of blood on grounds of conscience is, in my opinion, more terrible than if it were to be permitted officially by law." I just loved how Razumkin was making things worse for Rodiya, and intentionally making things worse for Rodiya during all this questioning that Porfiry was doing. It was absolutely hilarious. And then one thing made me gasp. I mean, it shouldn't have, because Rodiya is totally very haughty, arrogant kind of person. So on page 315, he says, Porfiry says, "What I mean is, sir, that when you were writing your article, it couldn't just possibly have been that you too considered yourself, just the merest bit, to be one of the extraordinary people who can say a new word in the sense you've explained. I mean, is that the case, sir?" And Raskolnikov contemptuously says, "I wouldn't rule it out." Extraordinary Raskolnikov. That should have been the title of this book. The one and only Raskolnikov. Yeah, there are a few mysterious people that appear in part 3. First one is the guy who follows Sonia back home to her apartment. Turns out he lives just next door. And in the end, we do find out who he is. He is the guy who was pursuing Rodiya's sister Dunya. Right, but he was married back then to Marfa, and we learn in part 3 from his mother, Rodiya's mother, that Marfa has passed away. So yeah, the widower is back, and the widower is now in St. Petersburg, and he knows where Rodiya lives. And the second one was the old guy who is the old hunched guy who just comes across Raskolnikov, and he points him out, and he's like, "You are a murderer." And Raskolnikov is totally taken aback. He is totally shocked, because obviously Raskolnikov in his brain thinks that he could have never made any mistake. And he also has a nightmare. Again, nightmares seem to be kind of like there's a theme, a symbolism, right? Nightmares symbolize something in here. And this nightmare was I think one of the worst, because in his nightmare, he again kills the old lady, right? Raskolnikov. I think part 3 was really good. It gave me a lot of clarity as to how cunning Raskolnikov is, how he sets up that entire scene with Razumkin, because he wants to, give out this vibes that he is a really lighthearted guy to Porphyry, right? When they arrive at Porphyry's place, he totally riles up Razumikin, teases him, which makes Razumikin really mad. Yeah, he's very cunning. We also get a hint as to why he might have parted with the money that he had, why he paid for the funeral expenses, was because he knew that he has a lot more, so why not just part with this small amount, because he stole a lot of jewelry from Alyona. Yeah, now I am just waiting for that one small thing that Raskolnikov might have done, which will expose him as the murderer. I would love to see his fall. That's so cunning of me, but I mean, come on, he's a murderer. He's just someone who should not be roaming out free on the streets. So yeah, catch him, put him in the prison, and never let him out. Let me know in the comments down below what your theories are about this old guy. I can't wait to find out who this old hunched guy is who knows that Raskolnikov is the murderer. I'm really eager to find out. So alright, I'm gonna stop here so that I can go ahead and read part 4. If you've made it so far in the video, thank you so much for watching this video. If you haven't already, please subscribe to my channel and like this video, and I will talk to you next time. Until then, take care. Bye bye.